Welcome back to the deep dive. You know, there's a very specific kind of paralysis that hits you when you're trying to be, healthy or organic in the modern world.
Oh, for sure.
You decide to grow your own food, you switch to natural fertilizers, and then suddenly you read some headline that says the very thing you thought was pure is actually like a toxic nightmare.
It's the modern wellness paradox, isn't it?
Mm,
We want to get back to nature, but we're also terrified of what's in nature.
yeah.
And most of us don't have the chemistry degree we need to tell the difference between a real threat and just pure clickbait.
Exactly. And that is exactly where we're starting today. We're looking at this really fascinating case study, I guess you could call it, centering on a very relatable crisis.
Okay.
We have this character, Tante Grün, which is basically Green Auntie,
Right.
who has this amazing organic apple orchard, fruit bushes, the whole 9 yards, and she has these two students, Kesser and Steen, helping her out.
Right. And they're from a nature and innovation class. The setup is classic. The students want to bring in a seaweed-based nutrient spray, a fertilizer, to boost the orchard.
That's perfect.
On paper, it is. I mean, it's the ideal sustainable solution. People have used seaweed in coastal farming for, what, centuries?
But then the modern world kicks in. Tante Grün starts scrolling on her phone. She sees these headlines, heavy metals, toxicity.
Poison.
Poison, yeah. And she just spirals. She's convinced that if these boys spray her apple trees with this seaweed stuff, she's going to poison her land, her family, everyone.
So our mission for this deep dive is to take this whole scenario, and we have the students' notes, their debates with their teacher, Professor Hendricks, even some pretty dense reports from the Technical University of Denmark, the DTU, and just answer the question.
Is seaweed a superfood for your garden, or is it a toxic mistake?
And to figure that out, we have to wade through a lot of murky water. We've got chemistry, media literacy, and the whole psychology of why our brains are just wired to fear the wrong things.
And it seems like we have to start with that fear. Because the professor, Hendricks, he frames this whole thing not as a gardening problem, really.
No, not at all. He says it's an information problem.
He has that great phrase for it, the culture of the gasp.
Yes. And it is so spot on for how we consume media now. You're scrolling, you see a headline like, seaweed contains arsenic, you gasp.
And you share it.
You share it, you don't read the methodology, you don't check the dosage, you certainly don't look up the species. You just have that instant emotional reaction.
It creates what he calls a short fuse. Tante Grün reads heavy metals, and poof, the fuse is gone.
The nuance is just obliterated. Her potential fertilizer now looks like toxic sludge before the boys can even lay out their hypothesis.
But here's the thing. She hasn't even defined what a heavy metal is. She's just reacting to the scary-sounding term.
And this is where the source material gets really good. Because the students, Kesser and Steen, they get into this surprisingly technical argument about the definition.
I loved this part. It felt like this clash of old-school physics and modern chemistry. They're arguing about density versus specific gravity.
It sounds super nerdy, but it really matters if you want to be precise. Specific gravity is the old way, a ratio comparing something to water. Kesser thinks it's outdated. He wants to talk pure density.
But they do land on a chemical definition to sort of settle it, right?
They do. The accepted scientific definition now is chemical. A heavy metal is basically any metal heavier than iron, Fe, on the periodic table.
So we're talking about lead, cadmium, mercury.
The usual suspects.
Yeah.
And manganese comes up, which is related to that ochre you see in wet soil. But here's the key distinction. There's a huge difference between heavy metals exist and heavy metal toxicity.
The industrial context versus the biological one?
Exactly. The notes mention workers at an iron factory. If you're smelting alloys, breathing in those fumes day after day, that builds up. That is heavy metal poisoning.
And Tante Grün is basically conflating that industrial level risk with, some seaweed from the beach.
But to be fair to her for a second, plants do accumulate these metals. That's the valid part of her fear. You don't want your apple tree acting like a sponge for lead.
That's true.
Plants can be accumulators. The sources mention sunflowers, which are sort of the classic example. They are hyperaccumulators. They literally pull metals from the soil and store them.
Mostly in the seeds, right?
Exactly, in the seeds, which, we then buy in bags and snack on.
Right. And that brings us to the most cynical but brilliant point that Steen makes. He calls that the hypocrisy of it all with what I'm calling the rice cake paradox.
Oh, this hit home for me. We've all seen it. Parents trying to be healthy, they give their baby a rice cake to keep them quiet.
It's the universal hush snack, but rice is notorious for absorbing arsenic from groundwater. It's just what the plant does.
So Steen's point is, we're freaking out about the seaweed fertilizer because it's new and from the ocean, but we blindly trust this processed beige disc from a supermarket because it's in a nice plastic bag.
So we're ignoring the arsenic we are eating to worry about the heavy metals we might be spraying on a tree.
It is a total failure of risk assessment. We fear the unknown monster in the seaweed, but ignore the known chemistry in the processed food. And it gets even messier when she brings up iodine.
No, this was a great mix-up. She is absolutely terrified of iodine. She lumps it right in there with the heavy metals.
Which just drives the students crazy.
Yeah.
Because chemically, she could not be more wrong. This is where you sort of need to picture the periodic table.
Okay, let's walk through it. Where are the heavy metals?
So lead, mercury, gold. They're mostly in the middle of the table. The transition metals, iodine is way, way over on the right. Group 7, it's a halogen.
And who are its neighbors in group 7?
Chlorine, bromine, fluorine.
Okay, to be fair to Tante, that is a rough neighborhood. Chlorine is in bleach. Fluorine is intense.
It's a very rough neighborhood. And that's a fair point Kesser makes. People hear fluorine and think of water fluoridation debates. They hear bromine and think of flame retardants gassing off their new carpet.
So her logic is basically, iodine is in the scary chemical group, therefore it's a toxin.
Guilty by association. But here's the difference. Unlike lead or cadmium, which the body has zero use for, you need iodine. You cannot survive without it. It runs your thyroid, your metabolism, everything.
The students use that gold analogy, don't they?
Yes. If gold is a heavy metal, why do we put it in our teeth? It's a great little rhetorical checkmate. Just because it's a chemical doesn't mean it's poison.
Okay, however, and this is a big however in the sources, just because Tante Groen got the chemistry wrong doesn't mean her worry is completely unfounded.
No, it's not.
We have this risk assessment from the DTU Food Institute, and frankly, it is not a glowing endorsement for just blindly eating seaweed.
No, it is not.
Yeah.
This is where we have to pivot from the simple superfood idea to seaweed is a complex biological organism. The DTU report looked at seaweed as food, and they found some genuinely concerning stuff.
So let's break that down. If she were to eat the seaweed instead of using it as a fertilizer, what's the actual risk?
First on the list, inorganic arsenic.
Okay, wait. There's a difference between organic and inorganic arsenic.
A huge difference. Organic arsenic, like you find in fish, is pretty harmless. It just passes through you. But inorganic arsenic is the bad one. It's a carcinogen.
And the DTU found that in
bladderwrack, which is super common in Danish waters, exactly where the boys might be harvesting, and in hijiki, a commercial Asian seaweed.
And the risk is lung cancer.
Yep, lung cancer, even at low intake levels over time. Then there's cadmium. Some seaweed species just soak it up. Long-term, high intake of that means kidney damage.
The report also says that Danes in particular shouldn't be adding new sources. Why?
It's all about context again. The average Danish diet already includes a fair bit of inorganic arsenic and cadmium from things like cereals and rice. So the DTU is basically saying, look, your bucket is already pretty full. Don't add a daily seaweed salad on top.
It's not that the seaweed alone is acutely toxic. It's that it can tip you over the limit.
Exactly. And then we're back to iodine. We just said it's essential. But the DTU warns about getting too much.
The Goldilocks problem. Not too little, not too much.
Precisely. They point to kombu, that kelp used in broths. It has massive amounts of iodine. Eat that all the time, and you risk messing up your thyroid just as badly as if you had a deficiency.
So Tante Grun's fear of iodine was wrong on the chemistry, but maybe directionally right on the health outcome. She was afraid of toxicity. She just didn't know it was hormonal.
That's a really good way to put it. And then, just to make it even scarier, the report mentions literal nerve poisons.
Right, cyanic acid and domoic acid, that sounds bad.
It sounds like something a Bond villain would use. These are natural toxins found in a seaweed called sole, which you might know as dulse.
Oh, I see dulse in health food stores, the little purple snacky kind.
That's the one. And here's where the science gets a bit fuzzy. The DTU flat out admits there's a knowledge gap. They know the toxins are in there. They just don't know if the levels are high enough to actually damage a human brain.
That's not very comforting.
Well, the report says, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the main reason they assume Danish seaweed is safe is because nobody has reported being poisoned yet.
Seriously, no body's no problem is the scientific standard.
It's honest, I'll give them that. We
Yeah.
just don't have decades of data on people eating these specific types in large quantities.
Okay, so the headlines are alarmist, but the actual science does say be cautious. How does Professor Hendricks handle this? He can't just tell the kids to ignore it all.
He brings in two huge concepts, geography and nuance.
The where is important.
It's critical. Hendricks makes the point that if you just buy seaweed fertilizer online, you have no clue where it's from. It could be from waters near a damaged nuclear plant.
Right.
But seaweed from a clean, local Danish beach has a completely different profile. Sourcing is safety.
And then he brings up Brazil nuts.
Yeah, I love this comparison. Brazil nuts are amazing, but they are incredibly high in selenium, and they even contain tiny amounts of radium. They are technically radioactive.
So you shouldn't eat the whole bag?
You eat two, it's a superfood. You get the whole bag, you're going to have a very bad time. The dose makes the poison. It's the oldest rule there is.
I want to go back to iodine for a second because the notes mention this piece of Danish history that I think explains a lot of the confusion.
Ah, the great iodine deficiency of 2000.
It sounds so dramatic.
Well, it was a public health crisis. Back in 2000, the Danish government had to mandate adding iodine to salt and bread. Before that, the average level was about 61 micrograms per liter in urine.
And the target is?
The target is 100. Below that, you start seeing widespread goiters, which are enlarged thyroid glands. The country was literally undernourished.
So for a whole generation, the public health message was, we need more of this stuff.
Exactly. And now, since the mandate, the levels are just above 100. They're in the healthy zone. So when Tante Green treats iodine like it's a poison, she's fighting the last war. The real enemy was deficiency.
It just shows how disconnected our fears can be from reality.
But, and this is the big pivot, Tante Green isn't trying to fix a goiter. She's trying to grow apples.
Right. We've done the toxicology report, we've toured the periodic table, but we still have a garden to fertilize. How do Kesser and Steen finally solve this?
They go back to the scientific method. Hendricks gives them a framework he calls if, but, and.
I like that. It's a way to slow down the panic.
Totally. If is the fear. If seaweed contains heavy metals. But is the context. But the dosage and species matter. And is the practical solution.
So what's their and? What's the final protocol?
It's a 4-part plan that basically builds a firewall against all those risks we talked about.
Okay, step 1.
Source. They use local Danish seaweed from a clean beach. No mystery imports.
2.
Selection. They know to avoid the bladderwrack, which accumulates arsenic. They're choosing the right species. Quality control.
And step 3, this seems like the most important one.
Application. This is the key. They are not asking her to eat it. They're not even dumping it on the soil. They're using it as a foliar spray.
So spraying it on the leaves?
Exactly. The plant absorbs tiny amounts of nutrients through its leaves. But more importantly, this allows for the final step. Dosage.
Dilution.
Extreme dilution. Because it's a spray, the solution is incredibly weak. They're not dumping tons of biomass on the roots that could build up over years. They're giving the tree a tiny vitamin shot on its leaves.
So the actual path from seaweed in the bucket to arsenic in the apple is practically non-existent.
It's negligible. The amount of any heavy metal transferred that way to the actual fruit is minuscule compared to what the tree is already pulling from the soil it's been sitting in its whole life.
So they took a scary headline, dismantled it with data, and designed a solution that gets all the benefits with none of the risks.
And Tante Grun gets her amazing apples, and she also learns that organic and effective don't have to be enemies. She just needed to understand the chemistry.
It really feels like the biggest lesson here isn't even about seaweed. It's about that short fuse that Hendricks mentioned right at the start.
Absolutely. We're conditioned to be afraid of ingredients. We see a chemical name, we panic. But the reality is always in the dosage and the application.
It's the difference between eating a concentrated toxin and using a diluted natural resource for your plants.
And realizing that natural isn't a synonym for, arsenic is natural. And chemical isn't a synonym for toxic.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with. We spent this whole deep dive debunking the fear around these natural compounds in seaweed. We did the homework that Tante Grun was too panicked to do.
We did.
But think about that rice cake again. If we are so willing to demonize a plant from the ocean because of a scary headline, why do we so casually ignore the verified chemistry and the processed stuff we consume every day? We trust the plastic box, but we fear the beach. Maybe the real heavy metal we're all carrying around isn't in the seaweed at all. Maybe it's the burden of uninformed fear.
That is a heavy thought.
Thanks for diving in with us. Check your sources, watch out for the clickbait, and we'll see you next time.